So today on the Keeping Abreast podcast, I am joined by someone that I have been wanting to introduce to all of you for so long. This is a clinician who unapologetically is on the frontier of women's health, of metabolic medicine, and of root healing. Dr. Austin Lake is one of the rare physicians who thinks. He is actually using his brain. He challenges dogma, he questions protocols, and he refuses to accept the idea that chronic disease is inevitable, that women should suffer through midlife as if it's some kind of biological punishment. He's known for connecting the dots between hormones, metabolism, inflammation, environmental exposures, resilience, and longevity. And he gives patients the kind of clarity that the traditional system just simply is not built to offer. What I love about Dr. Lake is that he's not afraid to say the uncomfortable things. He's not afraid to call out the gaps in conventional care, and he's committed to giving people, especially women, evidence-based tools that actually move the needle. So get ready for a conversation that might challenge what you've been told and empower you with what you need to know. Dr. Austin Lake, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jen. I really appreciate that kind introduction. And one correction I need to make that this isn't often thing that happens to me is, I have a doctorate, but I'm not a physician. And so part of what I've done is I've tried to, I partner with physicians. One of my business partners is a physician, and we utilize that skill set. But my skill set is actually very much in the prevention and, not needing to go down the road of medication if we need to, but just to kind of give a point of clarity there, that's not my official.
So I thought about that when I was writing your intro, and I thought about, what does that even mean anymore? Because
that's a good point.
We are so lost in terms of what is a physician even supposed to be? What is a physician even supposed to do? Because we think of physicians as healers, right? Because that's what they were.
Right.
And that's what they were intended to be. But we got very lost along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, doctor as a, somebody who's an educator, somebody who provides information, somebody who helps and specifically in the area of health to heal, I think you're 100% right. Like we've gotten away from educating and providing, hopefully informed consent. And we've gone to this whole, direction of pushing pills and pushing down an industry that is not producing results. And I think that's why there's so many people out there that are seeking even, unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, but fortunately, unfortunately, people like myself, because I think it's very hard to get outside of the indoctrination that can happen to you when you're in school. And, with getting my doctorate, I was still getting quite indoctrinated. And it wasn't until I figured out that there was these other avenues I can take to start to heal and fix my own health problems that I looked at functional medicine as an actual an approach to fixing problems. And so, yeah, I think you're 100% right. Like, unfortunately, the term doctor, physician is gotten flipped upside down, and people are questioning where they can go to get sound advice.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you start to think outside of the box?
I was forced to, unfortunately. I think it started, so my parents, my mom had an autoimmune issue, has an autoimmune issue, adult onset Still's disease. My dad had several heart attacks when he was in his 40s and 50s. Currently has congestive heart failure. My brother was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 14. I was at the young,
God, that's horrible.
Yeah, young age of 12 is when this all started kind of happening. So it was definitely a cascade of events for my family. Like, it was a lot of stressful things as a result of financial stress, and obviously my brother, he survived, but it was very close. It was they caught it very late, and it was a conventional medical doctor that actually played a big role in saving him by the grace of God. But there was repercussions for that, right? Like, he had knee joint issues, and thankfully he's been able to have 3 beautiful daughters and all that. But he's he paid a bit of a price for that. But that was kind of where my initial, I guess, interest in the health field came about. But I even at a young age, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, realized that what they were doing in terms of the conventional medical system just didn't seem quite right to me. They would give them chocolate pudding every day, and they would give them like pop and whatever else you wanted.
Isn't that mind blowing?
Yeah, it was just like,
I
why does that
remember
on here?
my rotation in pediatric surgery, and unfortunately, a lot of what you see when you're working in a pediatric hospital is oncology.
Yeah.
And I remember even then, I mean, we're talking about 30 years ago, and I was a conventional doctor. And even then, it just seemed bizarre to me what we were feeding these kids with cancer.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think I don't know. To me, it just shows the level of indoctrination that can happen to us, because you have to go pretty far down the wrong hole, wrong rabbit hole, to think that what you eat doesn't make a difference, to like, and how it would impact your health. And I just, even still, after all the things we're seeing with RFK and the Maha movement and podcasts like yours and, pages like mine, like there's so many people out there talking about it, but yet, I run into conventional doctors all the time, even on social media, that like they badmouth me, and like they have pages dedicated to slandering what I'm doing, because like they just think it's a bunch of baloney. And I'm just like, how could you still at this point in time think that? And I know it takes a generation or two for this information to permeate the education system and medical schools and higher ed. But come on, it's 2025. Like we have unlimited access to information at our fingertips all the time. And it just, you really have to turn a blind eye to not see it at this point. At least that's how I feel at this point in time.
Yeah, but it's so much easier to discredit you than for them to deal with two levels of discomfort. First, they don't know, right? So they feel uncomfortable about what they don't know, about what they're not trained on. And they're working so many hours that for them to commit to getting to know is a big commitment that probably they're not prepared to do. So there's that. And there's also the realization that, oh my God, I've been doing something that's not exactly right for decades.
Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow. And it's also hard, it's what's that whole saying? Like, it's easier to fool somebody than to get them to admit that they've been fooled, and it's like, nobody wants to be duped. Like, it's a terrible feeling. But I think when you can see the widespread foolery that's happened, I think it would be a little bit easier for us to be like, hey, we've all been duped, to a certain extent, and nobody gets out of this alive. Like, we all have to kind of own up on like what we didn't know and how we've been tricked. And that's okay. Like, but what you do from that point on is what really matters. And if you continue to go down this path knowingly, that's where I have a big problem with people. And that's where I really can't stand that. And so that, I just think for all practitioners and people listening, like, your doctor wants to help. Like, most doctors I've ever talked to, colleagues I've had, like, they all want to help people. Like, that's why we get in the industry. It's just, there is an issue of this silo that can happen between different specialties and different practices and different, types of clinicians, to where if I'm a specialist in one area and I've worked really hard to get there, and I've been trained by the best people in the world to earn this certification or this board certification, going against that and saying like, well, they're all wrong, or like I've been lied to, is extremely hard. And so you're assuming that if you don't know it, then nobody else knows it. Right. Like, and they're all lying and they're all deceived, and they haven't spent the time that you've spent. And it's like, they're just a bunch of ignorant people. And like, you're the one who knows it. So it's such a, in my opinion, it's a very crafty way of tricking not just the doctors, but the whole industry to thinking that we're all doing what's best for the patient. But it's, in my opinion, in my research, when you look back at, the Flexner Report and the Rockefellers and all the things that they did back in the early 1900s to get us to where we are now, it starts to make a lot more sense as to how we are here and how we've gotten to where we are.
So talk a little bit about the Flexner Report, because I don't know that that's such common knowledge.
Yeah.
And I don't know that most people are aware of how this transformation of our medical system, from one that was really more focused on healing to one that was so symptom and reactive centered and pharmaceutical laden?
Yeah, such a good question. And again, much like you, I learned about this probably, I think it was 2016, 2017, which at that point in time, I was like, it felt like such revolutionary information to me. And I think the problem that I have even still is, repeating this information multiple times, like you start to think that everyone knows this stuff. But the truth is, you're right. Like it can't be
They
talked
don't
about
know.
enough. So
Yeah,
the
they
Flexner
don't know.
Report primarily stemmed from the Rockefeller family and Andrew Carnegie, who are two very wealthy families who were heavily involved in petroleum, oil. And for most of you who don't know this, if you don't know this, most pharmaceuticals are petroleum based products. So they're not like a natural substance that we get. Like they're natural in the sense it comes from the earth, but petroleum is not what I would call a natural substance. And so they're creating these products. Once they figured out that they could synthesize things like vitamins, they're like, well, we could also synthesize these things like pharmaceuticals that are petroleum based that will benefit us because we own 90% of the market. And so they created this Flexner Report, which was designed to establish a standardized way of medicine in the United States, which again, sounds like a great thing to do. Like we want to standardize this and make sure we have the American Medical Association, that we have, these institutions that are propagating correct information and ensuring that we're being safe and all these things. So that was the whole quote unquote agenda with the Flexner Report. But what it ended up doing was citing things like natural medicine or more holistic care, homeopathy and things like that, to become what we would call a quackery, type of field. It's something that's illegitimate. It's not been proven or established. It's not standardized. And so they started to fund a lot of these schools like Harvard and Johns Hopkins and these different places that we are still using today to train our doctors. And they are doing it because they have standardized the curriculum that those doctors should follow. And it is based in a pharmakeia or pharmaceutical approach that is a symptom-based approach. And so that's kind of where we are today. And you start to see how you can extrapolate that over the course of, 80, 90 years and see how it's gotten to where it is now, to where we have generations of people thinking there's a pill for every ill. And all they have to do is go to their doctor, who's the expert in all things health, and all their problems will be solved. But when you look at the fact that we have, we spend the most amount of money in the world on healthcare, and we have some of the worst quality of care in the world, especially amongst developed nations, you can see that something's not quite right.
Yeah. And what it has resulted in is we were literally farming out our health to people who are not qualified to be in charge of it. Right. And even as a medical student, even as a resident, you are totally unaware of this whole tightly controlled narrative. Like you really accept everything that is being taught to you as absolute truth. And for the people that question it in that process, they are totally ostracized.
Yeah.
You cannot, I mean, they'll kick you out of the system if you don't get in line.
Right.
And it still happens today.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. I think it's just like it's like this narrative of like vaccines are safe and effective. Doctors are like, trust your doctor, trust the science. Like there's these narratives that we spit out.
Yeah, trust the science.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
What
right?
does that even mean? Like science is a methodology. Like it's a process. It's not a religion, and I think people treat it like that. And
dogma.
Yeah, it's dogma, absolutely. And so I think all I want people to do is just be willing to ask questions and try to get answers to those questions. Like, and if you do that, again, we live in 2025. There's a plethora of information, sometimes too much out there to where it feels overwhelming. But again, if you search and you find podcasts like yours, like you will start to see that this stuff is not made up. Like we don't have anything to benefit from this. If anything, we're putting our license at risk by talking about it, and our families at risk. And so it's one of those things that we pursue and we discuss because we believe it's true, because we've been on both sides of the aisle here, to where it's like we were indoctrinated just like everybody else. By the grace of God, we've come over to this other side and like realized the truth of how things maybe actually work a little bit better than we thought. And now we just want to tell people about it. Like, that's all we're trying to do is just share truth. And so I don't know. I just want people to be willing to talk about it and not just immediately reject something because they've been told to reject it.
Yeah. And I think that I always say what we need to do is maintain curiosity.
Mm.
Like, we can't ever think, oh, that problem's been solved and I'm done.
Right.
Right? Because it changes all the time. The information changes all the time. And when the information changes, so must our minds.
Mm. So true.
You know, and we're seeing that played out right now in real time with, we were told for many, many years, the vaccine science is settled. Vaccines do not cause autism, right? The science is settled. And now I think they just updated the CDC website recently that says, maybe not. Maybe the science isn't settled.
Yeah.
That
Turns out there was, that was never true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I do think that things are changing, albeit slowly. But what do you think are the most pressing changes that we need to see happening right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I
It's
try.
a doozy of a question, right?
Yeah, I always try to. I never want to. I have a tendency of having a pessimistic, viewpoint. I think because I call myself a critical thinker, and I critique things. Like, I get paid to critique, but I've also transitioned my career to get paid to encourage, and so I've had to kind of have a better balance here. But what I would say is, whenever you think about what disrupts health, and you can start at the top, where 90% of our diseases are stemming from stress. Now, whether it's mental, emotional, or physiological, stress is a main driver of all things chronic disease. So I always tell people, like, you first have to understand that what you think and how you operate and how you function on a day-to-day basis has a huge impact on how your body responds to this threat that it's up against every day with environmental toxins and mold toxins and parasites and heavy metals that are maybe falling from the sky or in your food or in the soil or in your water. Because there's a lot coming at us. And I think the body is very capable, for the most part, of dealing with somewhat of these things that are in our environment. And granted, the environmental toxic burden has greatly increased compared to maybe 100 years ago or maybe even 50 years ago. And so there is that element there that we need to be very proactive about reducing. And I think, fluoride is one thing I was posting about this morning with, CNN was posting how turns out fluoride is actually not as bad as people have been saying recently. And here's a study to show it. And, there's just things like that where it's like, hey, if we can control fluoride in our water, fluoride in our toothpaste, like, why not do that? Like, control that for the population, control it for your own household. Same thing with, like, your air quality in your home. Like, if you can control that, you may not be able to control the things they're spraying in the clouds or whatever, but you can control the air that you're breathing in your home. So use a good quality air filter. I use Jasper air filters. Air Doctors are good filters, but there's different filters out there you can use, but you can control those things. So your food, your water, your air are all things that are within your control. Now, in terms of like a macroscopic perspective from our government's perspective, I think we have to give our citizens every advantage that we can. And in my opinion, I think we would see tremendous benefit if we had some kind of, subsidy or some kind of financial incentive for people to grow locally and to use some of these farms that maybe just are producing a bunch of corn to, like, actually have some, like, smaller farms that are producing multiple crops that you can then spread out to your local community without having to spray of so many pesticides or preservatives just to deliver it cross country. Like, you could actually grow it and sell it locally. And I think there's ways to encourage people to do that. And there's so much land that we have available that people always that are in the cities don't understand this. But if you go out to, like, Kansas or anywhere in the Midwest, you'll drive for miles and miles and miles and not see a single building or, like, single town. And so there's tons of land that we can use for that kind of stuff. But I think the government really could incentivize people to do that. And I think there's people out there that want to do that. And the other thing is just, we can't put pressure on people in terms of any kind of mandates or anything like that for vaccines. Like, I think if you have your own family and you have your career and you're being told that you have to get a vaccine to work or your kid has to get a vaccine to go to school or to play sports, like we need to continue on a state level just to like every state should be very similar and say like, hey, you do what you think is best for your family. We're going to provide you this is what we think is best. You don't have to do it. Like, we're not going to force this down your throat. We're not going to pressure you. We're not going to provide marketing against you to like pressure you. Like we saw during COVID, like there was so much pressure that we saw that people were being forced to do these things that they did not necessarily want to do because there was not enough data. Like we cannot continue to do that. Like we have to draw a hard line and just say like no to that. And I think that starts on the federal and state level. And then beyond that, I would just say like we need to encourage families to like, we need to encourage the support of the nuclear family again. I think we need to make the nuclear family like a positive thing. And I think so many households have turned into hotels where we are constantly coming in and out of them, never making a home cooked meal, never sitting down at a table to eat. We are constantly like on the run and doing sports and doing school activities and doing work stuff. And then, we get home and we're exhausted and we stay up late, watch Netflix. And it's just like, that's no way to live healthily. And like, you're going to see more chronic disease pop up just by that one factor alone. So there's just things like that I think we need to really focus on that are pretty basic and pretty simple, but maybe hard to do in our busy world.
Yeah. But the downtime's a big thing. The downtime is a very big thing. I wonder if RFK will make enough of an impact in the vaccine space in the 3 years that he has left in office.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. I saw a very funny cartoon. It said, your unvaccinated child is going to give my vaccinated child the disease that my vaccinated child has been vaccinated against.
Right.
And it's like, make it make sense.
Yeah.
Like, if you think the vaccines work, what the hell are you worried about?
Right.
And what do you care?
Right. Well, yeah. And it's like, I mean, I think the one thing that RFK is, he is making probably a bigger impact is than maybe we even know right now is just allowing the information, the lack of studies and or the real studies that have been done on vaccines to come out and like to be discussed. Whereas before, I mean, as you and I have known, like these are topics we couldn't discuss in the public forum. Like these are things that we would talk about and get banned for. And so now we're at least able to talk about it. And I hope that's enough, that has enough of a ripple effect for the next, after his term is up, to where we can continue with this. But I do think if people don't really take this seriously and take advantage of the opportunity that we do have right here and right now to do something about it, I think it may not be enough. I think it may be something that we start seeing different types of mRNA vaccines, like they're talking about wanting to put it in, in our food and inject it into cows and beef. And, we're seeing.
I'm actually very afraid of that. I think that threat is very real.
Yeah.
Where they're just going to go around us.
Right.
And say, hey, you think that you're going to opt out, but we're going to opt you in anyway.
Automatically. Yeah. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Well, and so go ahead.
Yeah. And like, who's on the inside that's going to stop that from happening?
Well, and I think and I don't think it's just about money. Personally, I think money is obviously a big motivator for these companies that develop mRNA vaccines, but they've been doing vaccines for a long time, making a bunch of money off vaccines for a long time. But the mRNA vaccine in particular, I think, to me, I have a bigger question about this one in particular, because I don't think we fully understand the potential goal that could be in place by people that are not trustworthy. And what I mean by that is, if they're kind of bypassing our consent and they're really forcing it down our throats, it's obviously not for our health. There's obviously another motive there. And I don't think it's just money. I think, and again, this is where it gets kind of dark and it may need to be censored in this podcast. I don't know if you want to keep it in or not, if it'll even be allowed to be kept in, but this is where I think when you look at the World Economic Forum and the WHO, you start to see that there has been for a while a stated depopulation agenda. And what that means is like they feel like less people is better for the quality of the people that are here that are left. And so when you understand that, you're like, okay, well then how would they actually get that to work? How would they actually accomplish depopulating the earth by even 5-10%? Like how would they, and I think that's greater than that, but like how would they even do that? They're not going to line us up and just, take us out to the barn and take care of us. Like there's going to be a way they're going to accomplish this. Right. And so in my opinion, and if you look at some really, and I'm not the expert on this at all, so just take this with a grain of salt. This is just a conspiracy, right? But the conspiracy here is that if there are nanoparticle technology that is coming through vaccines and through food and through our air that can be manipulated by frequencies that are coming through 5G and eventually 6G, that frequency, much like the radiation that you experience, whether it's non-ionizing or ionizing, has a negative cellular effect on our health, right? And so when you have these nanoparticle technology inside of your system, I think initially it's going to be for, hey, convenience. Like you can track your health data and you can fly across the country by like walking in and they scan you and they know who you are and they know your vaccine schedule and they know if you're up to date. Like they can track all this stuff with this nanoparticle technology. And this is well established. This is not my opinion. Like this is the capability of this technology.
No, those things definitely exist.
Yeah. So like that's where I'm like, they're clearly forcing this down our throat. It appears to be for maybe that reason where it's initially control. And then after that, it may be something much more dark. And I think it could potentially be like they could crank up the dial on radiation and frequencies and do who knows what with human bodies. So that's my big concern.
That's frightening and maybe a little too science fiction-y for me, but that it's not at all impossible.
I know.
And God knows that there are very, very, very sinister things happening out there.
Right.
In plain sight, there are so many wolves in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So many that we have been suffering under in some instances for decades. I mean, I go back to the mammogram thing all the time.
Right.
How on earth, in what crazy universe could radiating your breasts every year be good for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet people buy it hook, line, and sinker. Are you ready for a breast cancer screening revolution? Well, I'm thrilled to introduce to you a breast cancer screening tool that I have only recently learned about, but I have universally adopted. This is the ARIA test. This groundbreaking at-home breast cancer screening test is one that I believe will completely change the game. So imagine a screening test that's as simple as shedding a tear, because that's ARIA. It's a non-invasive, convenient, and perfect for all bodies and all breasts. Dense breasts, implants, no problem. ARIA makes it clear for everyone, even women as young as 30. ARIA is backed by over a decade of clinical trials, thousands of samples, and it's developed alongside top breast health experts. Here's how it works. You collect a tear sample at home, and then ARIA then analyzes it for protein biomarkers that can signal early breast cancer. And the best part, you get a consultation with a breast health specialist to review your results. Now, ARIA isn't replacing breast imaging. I am using it alongside QT. It's complementing it and giving you a fuller picture of your breast health. Knowledge is power, and ARIA is putting that power back in your hands. It's time to take control of your breast health, and ARIA is another way of doing it. Go to aria.care, AURIA.care, and use my code DrJenn20 in capitals, DRJENN20 to get 20% off. Back to our show.
Like you say that, and you like, again, I got banned off TikTok for saying that. Like they took away my account. Like no warnings, no three strike. It was done immediately just for making that statement. Like, and I think again, that's, to me, I'm just like, why is this why are they so defensive about these certain topics? It's like, well, they make, number one, a ton of money, as you well know. And I think they harm a lot of people. Like they are harming people. And again, I don't think doctors are doing this on purpose. I don't think doctors are intentionally harming people. Like that's not what I'm saying. But the people at the top, whoever they are, who are making profit, like they know what happens. They know the real science on this, and they know the risk. And I think that's where it makes me furious. Like, cause I have several people I know that have had breast cancer, biopsies and, the whole 9 yards. And it's just like, it's so frustrating to see them go through that when, about 35-50% of them probably never need to be done in the first place. Like they never had the radiation or the surgery or anything.
No,
So
I mean, we've had study after study, huge studies, large numbers of women. These are not one-offs that show that anywhere from 20 to 30% of the cancers that we diagnose using these screening modalities are subclinical and would never develop into a mass, would never metastasize, would never threaten anyone's life. And, quite frankly, if we did autopsy studies on everyone, right? Not women who die of breast cancer, but women who are in car accidents, women who commit suicide. If we just all comers did autopsy studies, at least 1 in 5 women would have evidence, microscopic evidence of breast cancer.
Wow.
Do 1 in 5 women need to be treated for breast cancer? No, of course not.
Right.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And just so people think that, oh, well, that number doesn't sound so outrageous because 1 in 8 women over their lifetime will get breast cancer. Yes, that's true. But I'm talking about if you went and did autopsy studies on 100 30-year-olds, and 1 in 5 30-year-olds does not have clinical evidence of breast cancer, but they will have microscopic evidence of breast cancer. And that's what people need to understand, that what is happening on a cellular level does not always need to be treated, in that your body is capable of great healing. And there are so many instances where that would never have come to fruition, which is why I don't believe in chasing these things.
Yeah. What's your take on biopsies?
So I am not of the mindset that biopsy leads to metastasis, mostly because every single person who has a diagnosis of breast cancer has undergone a biopsy, right?
Sure.
Like that's how they get a diagnosis of breast cancer. Not nearly 100% of people who get breast cancer will die of metastatic disease. It's more like 20%, maybe 30%. So 70% of women who get a breast cancer diagnosis by having a biopsy never have metastatic disease. So I don't think it's the biopsy. I don't think the biopsy has anything to do with it. I do understand people's thinking that, it's a contained process and we are disturbing that and releasing some cancer cells into the system. Yes, that might be true, but our system is designed for cleanup.
Right.
And so these little like individual cells that may or may not get dispersed into the bloodstream, they should be handled. And oftentimes they are.
Yeah.
Right. It is not the majority because we know that at the time of diagnosis, only about 4% of women present with metastatic disease. Most women present with local or regional disease, not metastatic disease. So I don't think it's the biopsy.
Yeah.
I think it's the biology of the tumor.
What do you, and I don't keep asking you questions, but I'm just curious.
No, it's great.
What do you think the role is? Because, I've had my own opinions on this, but I obviously not an oncologist, but what do you think the role is with, parasites in terms of your immune system and helping to kind of mitigate that cancer biology or, in that sense, like, is there a role there in your opinion?
They're not helping, right?
Yeah, sure.
They're definitely not helping.
Right.
So when I can only really speak to my patient population, but It is astounding to me that nearly everyone that comes to me with a breast cancer diagnosis, when you look at their CBC, and this is not a sophisticated test, right? This is literally a test that almost everyone who gets a breast cancer diagnosis gets every year from their doctor before then. And these women are walking around with white counts in 3s, some of them in the 2s, and no one is saying anything about it. Their doctors are not acknowledging that for all intents and purposes, these people are walking around immunocompromised. It's no wonder they develop breast cancer.
Right.
Breast cancer is like the intersection of your response to the toxic environment, right? Cellular damage as a response to the toxic environment, but also a failure of the immune system to recognize those mutated cells in their infancy. So, and I think a large part of why we are so immunocompromised, I mean, yes, it's metals and yes, it's viruses, but it's also parasites, and they're so ubiquitous.
Right.
You don't have to eat, what's the thing called where you eat raw meat, like steak tartare or something like that? You don't have to eat steak tartare. You don't have to eat sushi to get parasites.
Right.
If you're eating fruits and vegetables, they're there. They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous. You don't have to go for foreign travel. They're right here at home.
Yeah. Well, and again, even a lot of parasite diagnostic tests are often going to show no parasites, and right. I've had clients do that where they'll show me a test and make, okay. And then we run them through a parasite detox. And what do you know? Like there's evidence of parasites. And it's like,
right. They're like, hello.
Yeah. And it's like, you can't ignore that, can you? And so, and again, it's not that, and I always tell people, my clients, it's like, it's not that parasites are the end all be all of all your health problems, but if they are there and they are growing, and my question then is like, well, what are you doing to feed them? Like, what are they living off of? And oftentimes heavy metals is a big component of that. And again, it's hard to get away from heavy metals. Like I just tested my daughter who's 6 years old, and she was full of mold, full of heavy metals, full of environmental toxins like BPA. And she lives in my house, right? Like, and I'm pretty cautious with these things and very on top of it. And she had that. My wife had it, and I'm sure my other kids probably have it, and I have it too. Like I've checked it myself. And so like there's all these things that build up over time that create this toxic burden that over time, it's like, well, this cancer came out of nowhere. And it's like, no, like your immune system has been burdened for quite some time. And then you add on top of that metabolic dysfunction. And next thing you know, your hormones are all out of whack, and your insulin spiking, your inflammation's out of control. You're not detoxifying these E4 pathways and all that different stuff, these hormonal pathways. And it's like, oh, well, like, I guess you start having, high incidence for cancer. But the true, in my opinion, the true way of starting to fix this is always being as preventative as possible and getting at the root of parasites for sure, your diet, your metabolic syndrome, ensuring that you are detoxifying, doing a total toxin test from like Vibrant Labs or something like that, and making sure that you're getting these things understood, and then working with somebody to actually start getting this stuff out. And then from there, you can kind of live more of a, an intentional life, but it doesn't need to be so like obsessive over health. But I think a lot of people, when they start feeling like, I got a cancer diagnosis, like I'm on my deathbed and like I don't have anything else to do but get cut, poisoned, and radiated, like I have to now, like, this is my only option. But the reality is, like, there are things you can do now to protect yourself, and there are things you can do even during a cancer battle to ensure that you're getting out of it successfully and you're not destroying all your organs. So I don't know, it's just I want to be encouraging about it, because it doesn't need to be like this do or die, like everything's going to hell in a handbasket kind of mentality. But there's some encouragement here too.
Let's go down the hormone pathway, because you are very well known for saying that they're not the be all end all. Yeah. And I am a little worried, as much as I believe in hormone replacement, but I believe that it is the bow on top of the box, and the box is filled with all those foundational things that we know actually build health.
Yeah.
I'm very worried now on the tail of them taking the black box warning off
Mm-hmm.
of hormone products, which I'm glad they did. They never belonged there.
Right.
But now we have 2 decades of providers that are totally untrained and, basically not aware of what they are, what they do, how to dose them, how to treat people. Like they're just not educated
Right.
with regard to hormones because for 20 years no one was doing it essentially. Right. So we have 2 decades of providers that are untrained, and we have this really strong narrative coming out of a very small subset of providers, the menopause, saying that everyone should be on hormones and hormones.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that women are going to kind of drive this bus and shop around for the person that will give them hormones, even though they're hormone illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
And we've, again, missed the forest for the trees in that that's no more of a solution than what we were doing before, right?
Yeah.
Like hormones aren't any more of a solution than the antidepressants were.
Right. Right. Well, I think my stance has always been, and obviously so, because, I don't prescribe, so it's very easy for me to think in these terms. And so this is why I always say it with the caveat of like, I usually work with people who have already been given hormone replacement therapy. Like they've already been on it for several years, and then they're still reaching out because it didn't solve, all their problems like a magic pill, obviously. But they were kind of sold that lie. So there's that whole category, like you were saying, there's these women that think it's going to solve every single problem. Then there's the people that are scared to death to touch it. I think like anything else, it requires nuance, right? Like you have to understand your own individual body. You need to work with a provider that is willing, in my opinion, to prescribe bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and also work with you in all these other lifestyle factors before you preferably get on it. Or if you are on it, kind of work to get you at an optimal level. And sometimes that can be a reduction of where you currently are with your hormonal dosages and all that stuff. So a lot of my clients, they'll come in, they'll say like, I'm on progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. And, I'm not sleeping. I'm still having some hot flashes, or maybe the hot flashes went away. My libido went up a little bit, but now I'm gaining a bunch of weight and my energy's still down. And like, now I'm having new concerns, right? Like there's just a different set of concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell them, look, like, when you give a hormone, they call it a hormone cascade for a reason. Like you can't just give a hormone expecting it to stay in that exact form the entire time. Like your body is way too intelligent for that. Yeah. Yeah. So like,
it's not a dog.
Yeah. It's not, it isn't. It's like, sit there, stay there, do nothing else, but be a dog. Like, like you have to understand there's nuance there. And so like your body is going to prioritize based on need and keeping you alive. Right. And so if your survival is at risk because you have high oxidative stress, or you're highly inflamed or nutrient deficient, or you're in a terrible circadian rhythm cycle, or you're over exercising, or, whatever else is going on, you start to take those hormones and use them maybe unfavorably. And this is where you start to see these, the 4-OH-E1 and E2 pathway become more predominant. And that's where you start to see this metabolite, because it's highly reactive and it can cause DNA damage, and it's mutagenic, and it's, more associated with estrogen-driven cancers. You can start to see things like cancer can become more of a probability, and you can start to see other conditions pop up. So I always tell people it'd be better to fix your lifestyle factors first, ideally, in an ideal world. See where you land, do, a hormone zoomer or, Dutch test or something like that to kind of see how things are looking. And again, it's not a diagnostic test necessarily, but it can definitely help your practitioner, if you have one, to kind of optimize your dosage and ensure that you're getting only what you need and nothing else. And you can see how it's converting. And I've talked to people all the time, clients all the time, like they've been put on the hormone replacement therapy like a couple years ago, 3 years ago, and they haven't talked to their doctor since or had any further testing. And I'm just like, that is wrong. Like you can't just be on that without, getting frequent follow-ups to make sure it's actually working for you. And so that's always been my opinion. But again, that's from my somewhat limited perspective, but it seems to work pretty well for our clients when they start to kind of understand that, and they can go to their doctor and actually request this kind of assistance. Then doctors are usually more than willing to help them with that.
The problem is that these women are going to go to their doctors, and the doctors are not trained on to think along those lines of where are you from a metabolic health
Yeah.
standpoint, and what are you eating, and how are you moving, and what kind of toxins are you exposed to, and what are your detoxification practices,
Mm.
and where's your stress, and how are you mitigating that stress. These doctors are not thinking about this. They're not trained on it. I mean, outside of, eat less and move more,
Yeah.
what,
Right.
there is no training inside of conventional medicine that that is looking at any of these things.
Yeah.
Literally any of them.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it takes it, this is why I created a whole, I switched my whole career to be more focused on women's health, because I was seeing these exact problems pop up to where I was like, I kept saying like, somebody needs to do something about this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, why don't you just do something about it? Like,
Yeah.
why don't you
Looks like
create,
the someone is you,
yeah, like, why don't you just
right?
create a program focused on women and make it practical so they can actually implement these things. Like they know what they need to do. And like, you become as well versed on this as you possibly can. And I'm still growing in that. And I probably will until the day I die and trying to understand how this all works. But, what I did figure out was the reason.
Oh, well, because understanding women is so easy.
Yeah, I can even, my own wife is like my first challenge, and that changes often. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
and then
It's intentional.
2 daughters and all that too. So, but even just in terms of the physiology, right? Like it's trying to wrap your head around how it happens. And so I think implementation is the hardest part, right? Like we can have the information and it may make more sense to us, but getting any person, not just a woman, but any person to change the direction they're going in, it's like trying to stop a runaway train. Like you have to get it to stop first and then move it the opposite direction. And that's difficult to do when you have a busy life. And so that's where I always want to start with my female clients, is saying like, okay, like what are you doing on a day-to-day basis that is not supporting you in your overall health goals, and how can we actually implement real changes that you can be consistent with? And that's hard, but like if you focus on the foundational things like we've already talked about, circadian rhythm, eating what I call an anti-inflammatory diet, which is really, a diagnostic diet, making sure that we know kind of what foods work best for you, and also understand like what time of year should you eat different types of foods. Like if you're eating foods when the sunshine is not out and about like it was in the summertime, and you're eating a bunch of high sugary foods later into the day, like you're not going to do as well with that. Like we're naturally kind
Yeah.
of like hibernating creatures. And so
Yeah.
kind of having that idea, and then also making sure that you understand what foods trigger your immune system is really important. And then making sure you have a basic understanding of what are you taking a methylated B complex? Are you taking any kind of omega-3 fatty acids? Are you taking any kind of minerals or magnesium or, sodium, potassium, adding any minerals to your water? Are you taking vitamin D? Like vitamin D is hugely important for hormones. Like if you have an inflammatory problem, hormonal problem, one of the first things you'll start to see is your vitamin D tanks. Like you're using it
Because
all
your
up.
body uses it up.
Yeah. So it's like, those are things, if you're seeing those signs in conjunction with, low white blood cells or, high eosinophils or whatever the case is, like these are all things that you can start to look at and get understanding with. And so what'd you spray in your mouth just there? Vitamin D? Oh, nice. Oh, that looks, oh, nice. Is that Quicksilver?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. This is how I remember to take my supplements.
Yeah.
I'm talking to either a patient, telling my patient, you have to take your vitamin D every day. And then I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Well, yeah. And that's the thing too, is like we all live busy lives, and it's easy just to like get distracted and all that stuff. But I think when people understand what their role is in this whole thing, and how it doesn't need to be 100 different things. It can be 3 to 4 things that you're consistent with. Like I'm going to take my vitamins. I'm going to put them by my toothbrush and by my food in the morning, so I don't forget to take them. I'm going to set an alarm for my bedtime instead of my morning time, so I can have a consistent sleep cycle and I can wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go. I'm not going to drink caffeine before I eat real food. I'm going to make sure I have good, clean, products I'm using in my body and my skin. I'm going to use an air filter in my house. I'm going to filter my water. Like those are things that like, after you do it for a couple months and you start to kind of invest in it, it doesn't take a ton of money or a ton of time. But once you get it established, you're going to feel 40, 60% better just by doing those simple things. Right. And so I think those are where I always want people to start. And then we can get a true picture of like what needs to be done beyond that. That is a little bit more involved. That's a little bit more complicated. But those things kind of rise to the top after you've done the foundational things, but you can't skip ahead to like, I'm just going to jump right to doing, at least in my opinion, right to doing, synthetic hormone replacement therapy and not change anything else and like be surprised when it doesn't work long term. Like I just think that's the wrong approach personally.
Yeah. It absolutely it's going to be a huge problem. I'm very, very afraid of, we tend to swing the pendulum too fast and too far.
Yeah.
Like either no one's getting hormones, now everyone's going to get hormones.
Right.
And I'm not saying that hormone replacement isn't what is right and appropriate for some people. However, it needs to be done thoughtfully, it needs to be done responsibly, and it needs to be done along with all of these foundational tools that I'm telling you, there's no way that is going to happen with the average patient.
Yeah.
There just isn't.
Yeah.
It just isn't. So I am worried about that.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm curious because you talked about the diet that's right for each individual person. And I do believe that there is a lot of bio-individuality involved.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to do to determine that? What testing do you use? Hello, my beautiful listeners. I'm taking a quick break here to share something truly transformative with you today. If you're ready to take control of your breast health journey, then you need to get your hands on a copy of my book, The Smart Woman's Guide to Breast Cancer. I wrote this book to make a massive impact in the world of breast cancer, empowering women everywhere to make informed choices and educated decisions. You have so much more power and control over your health than you might think. And this is a roadmap to harnessing that power. Inside, you'll uncover the truth about conventional treatments, their often overestimated benefits, and underestimated, underexplained, and underdisclosed long-term side effects. But more importantly, you'll discover the true drivers of health and how the choices you make at home every day can lead you to the breast health of your life, even after a breast cancer diagnosis. Whether you're looking to prevent a diagnosis, avoid recurrence, or simply live your healthiest life, this book is for you. Join me on this journey to empowerment and health. Grab your copy of The Smart Woman's Guide to Breast Cancer today, and let's revolutionize the way that we approach breast health together.
I mean, I use the gold standard, which is elimination diet. It's in my opinion, the best way and the cheapest way to get results within a 4-week time period. And so the thing I always tell my clients is, your immune system has memory, and that memory applies to what you eat in terms of food. And so a lot of people, getting back to vaccines, have been exposed to these egg-based proteins that were being used for vaccine development and use. And so when people were getting some of these vaccines back in the day, maybe even still, I'm not sure if it's as common as it used to be, it created a bit of an immune system response to eggs. And so you have that to contend with. And then you also have to understand that, like, depending on how the eggs are grown or, how they're being taken care of or not, also affects the quality that can become more of an immune sensitizing type of food. So eggs are one of those things that we kind of have people eliminate in the first 4 weeks. And we have a whole diagnostic plan to kind of follow to kind of make sure we know what they should be doing, whether it's like a low FODMAP or autoimmune protocol or, a diet like that can kind of be more diagnostic in that sense. And so that's why I say it's diagnostic diet, but really it's kind of a structure I've created to ensure that we get an understanding of what, based on their history, would work best for them to kind of get them feeling better as fast as possible. But what people don't understand is that if you have an issue with gluten, which most people do, especially if it's hybridized, if you have gluten 2 weeks ago, you could be dealing with the repercussions of that 2 weeks later. Like you can have symptoms ongoing. So if you're like, well, I cut out gluten most of the time and I still feel bad, it's like, well, if you've had it every few weeks, you're probably not ever getting ahead of it. So that's where that diagnostic component comes in, to where if you can actually cut these things out and feel better while you're also detoxing, while you're also meeting your nutritional needs, while you're also working on your sleep and circadian rhythm, Next thing you know, you're like, hey, my energy's up. I've lost weight. I have some more mental clarity. Like my skin's clearer. My cycles are better. It's like, wow, what do you know? Like now you're on the right path of healing. Now you need more time. Whereas before, when you're on the wrong path, you want as little time as possible. But when you're getting better, the more time, the better you have to start healing even faster. So I always try to tell people, like, if you have a conviction that what you're doing is working, you're going to keep putting the effort in. If it's not working because you're missing a couple components, like, I don't blame you for not for doing what's convenient, because like you'd be a crazy person to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and not getting any kind of different results. So you really want to make sure that you are truly understanding what could be driving your symptoms. And once those symptoms start to go away, now you're on the right path. Now you need time to start seeing these other things kind of rise to the surface. And that's where you can start to tweak and modify for a long-term strategy to get better. But when people start feeling better within the first 4 to 6 weeks, they're like blown away because they thought that they had no chance to even get better,
Yeah, it is amazing. So I know you eliminate eggs and gluten. What else is on your elimination list?
Yeah, and it kind of depends, but for the most part, we'll do nightshades as a category. We'll do some legumes and some grains. We'll do we say gluten and dairy are two of the other categories as well. And so people are like, well, what do I eat? And it's like, well, you have meat products. If it's from a good source, preferably I want things to be grass fed, grass finished if you can. But we want to make sure that you're eating, as organic as possible, fruits and veggies, especially, like strawberries and these berries that are heavily exposed to organic or inorganic pesticides. So we want to make sure that they're eating clean foods there. And then, but like really what I found is that what people have a struggle with is they struggle with the convenience factor of eating things that are easy to grab and go. But when you have to like sit down and make a meal, like what do you typically have in that meal? You usually have like a protein, like a meat source. You usually have a veggie, and you probably have some fruit. And if you want to add like white rice or something like that's been soaked, preferably soaked the night before, then rinsed, like, and then cooked in like a Instapot or something like that can be a good source of some calories, some carbs. But for the most part, like those are basic foods. And then cutting out nightshades like, tomatoes and potatoes and things like that can be very helpful, because most nightshades have a bit of they cause an accelerated breakdown on your intestinal lining, right? So you're more prone to having like leaky gut type symptoms. And so they're actually designed that way. You'll see them in a lot of supplements. You'll see like black pepper will be in supplements because it can help to break down and enhance absorption of whatever you're taking. And so they're kind of known to do that. But if you have a leaky gut condition where your gut's intestinal wall permeability is becoming more permeable to things that it shouldn't, you start getting, these environmental waste products or toxins coming in from the outside into your bloodstream. That's when you start seeing more of an inflammatory response. And so it's really important that we can kind of close those channels up and help your gut to heal faster, so that you can then absorb what you need to absorb and keep out what you need to keep out and pass it through your stool, and you start seeing less inflammation and feel a lot better. So those are just some categories I like to think about, but there's other things, some nuances that depending on what the person's dealing with, I like to kind of get a better understanding of them and what would be best for them as far as the diet goes.
Is there anything that you permanently keep out of people's diets? Like, are there any basic groups that you put in the elimination diet that you don't really add back in afterwards?
I mean, I would say any gluten or grains that are from the United States. Like if it's, I like einkorn flour.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. I would say like I like einkorn flour. That's a good one to cook with if you tolerate gluten. And if it's just like a hybridized wheat issue, like that's easily fixable. You can go einkorn flour or get like a natural grain from like, or an ancient grain. Because I biblically
and so
speaking,
everyone knows the flour that Dr. Lake is talking about right now is that's actually the wheat of biblical times.
Yeah.
So that's what when you read in the Bible about wheat and bread that was made in those times, it was made from einkorn wheat.
Yeah. I'm glad you added that. It's 100% right as far as I've been told too. So, and again, I think that's such an interesting, because you look at the bread, you look at even dairy and meat, all these things that were consumed in Bible times, like they were some of the main staples of people's diets. But there's caveats there, right? So like when it comes to dairy, if you're consuming, ultra pasteurized dairy that's been just nuked with high temperature, and you're gonna nuke all the beneficial bacteria and potentially digestive enzymes and immunoglobulins that would help in your immune system. Like if you can tolerate, lactose and dairy as a whole, and it's more of a quality issue, people usually do much better with consuming raw dairy than they would pasteurized dairy or ultra pasteurized dairy. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're actually getting some of the protective benefits of consuming that. But even still, that's one category that I like to get a really good picture on to see, is a case an allergy, or is it just a lactose intolerance and they don't digest it very well? Because if that's the case, you can address that and you can eat better quality and take a lactate enzyme or something like that. But otherwise, the big one for me would be the gluten and the dairy, and like having some nuance there to figure out like what type are you consuming and do you have access to. If you can't afford those things or you don't have access to it, then my opinion would be better just to avoid it.
We know that metabolic disease and metabolic dysfunction is kind of the stepping stone to all of these chronic diseases that you and I deal with on an everyday basis. We know now more than ever about metabolic disease, about the drivers of metabolic disease. Like this is a time when we understand more than ever, and yet the rates are still climbing. Like, what is going on there? What are we missing as a society?
Well, I think so. When you look at what, at least in my understanding, what the root cause of insulin resistance is, it's primarily inflammation, right? Like it's a chronic state of inflammation. So it kind of gets back to all these things that we just talked about. Like if you are eating even like low glycemic index types foods that shouldn't be raising metabolic dysfunction or increasing metabolic dysfunction, but if they are inflammatory or they're filled with other chemicals that your body does not agree with, that by itself will raise inflammation. Then if you're exposed to blue light in your home or on your computer screen or your phone or whatever, and like you're getting that disruption to your circadian rhythm, that will start to raise cortisol, which will then lead to a higher propensity of reducing insulin sensitivity. And so you're going to have less melatonin, you're going to have worse poor sleep. And all this will start to disrupt, insulin resistance and make your body more susceptible to metabolic syndrome. So I think we have to look at what drives insulin resistance, and it's all these things that we've been talking about. It's toxins in our environment, it's toxins in our house, it's in our food, all those things.
Yeah. I actually saw someone, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and she's being told that she has metabolic syndrome and she has normal blood pressure. She's of normal weight. She has normal waist circumference. What she has is elevated glucose, a little bit of elevated fasting insulin. Her fasting insulin is in the 7s range. So nothing terrible at all. But her fasting glucose is 110. And this is entirely cortisol driven.
Right.
Entirely cortisol driven. She's not this woman with a bunch of visceral fat. She's not what we picture in terms of metabolic dysfunction. Does she have metabolic dysfunction? Yes.
Sure.
But it's entirely cortisol driven.
Yeah.
And there is no acknowledgement of that whole, you started to say it before, that stress is the root cause of 90% of what we're dealing with and looking at. And this woman, like, absolutely, she was the textbook example of she can't eat any better.
Right.
She can't move any better. She can't sleep better, but it's, again, all driven by this cortisol response.
Well, and again, this is why I think 1 in 8 women have thyroid problems. Like, this is why 80%-ish of women have hormonal imbalances. This is why, women are experiencing a lot more autoimmunity, about 80% of autoimmunity. And you understand that women perceive stress about 40% more than men do as a sex. And so this is where I'm a huge advocate for being a little bit more traditional in our modern culture of encouraging less responsibility from women when they already have a lot on their plates, and then we're at it in all these different categories as well. And it kind of comes under the guise of like this feministic movement of like, go out and conquer your career and like do all these things, and like, like you don't need a man and all these different things. But like we're all created to support each other. Like, I have skill sets that my wife doesn't have and vice versa. And we support each other. So like I offload things from her and she does the same thing for me. There are a lot of women out there, unfortunately, whether they're single mothers by choice or not, or just single in general that are taking on all these things all the time. And then you combine that with all the environmental things that we've been talking about, and you see stress just rise to the top. Like it is a huge driver. And so that's why I think women are so subject to all these different diseases more than men. And there's also the conversation that like women will seek out medical care more than men will and all those things too. But like, I think it's more than that. I think it truly is like women are under attack. And again, my pessimistic viewpoint on this is that women are under attack for a reason, because if you don't want more people, who do you go after? You go after the women. Like women are the fertile source, the nurturing source for our whole society. And like, if you don't have that, like you don't have a society at all.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is another place where you and I have a tremendous amount of synergy, in that we are both very faith-driven, God-fearing people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the same religion. Yours came a little after mine, but
throw that in there. I don't even know what your religion is, but I think
I'm Jewish.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%. And I actually know that we are living outside of our intended biologic selves, in that women are supposed to work differently than men. Women are serve a different function.
Right.
And when we try to live like men, we often have physical challenges because of it. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of backlash for this.
Same.
I am not saying that women are lesser. I don't believe that. I know that a lot of people are very, very critical of Orthodox Jewry because it seems like women are unimportant or lesser or that kind of thing. It's not true. If you're truly educated in, if you study Torah and study Talmud, you'll know it's not that women are lesser. We're just different. Right. Women have one role in society. Men have another role in society. And one isn't better than the other. And we cannot survive without one another. And what women do is just as important as what men do. It's just not the same.
Right. And
as we try to be the same as men, we start to experience dysfunction.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at PCOS. Like you look at, high insulin, and you look at metabolic syndrome, and you start to see what happens with their hormones. They become more male-like in a sense. Like you don't ovulate, you start getting facial hair development, and you start maybe packing on weight in different areas that you wouldn't want. And like that's more of in my opinion, more of an adaptation than it is a dysfunction. And I think that's maybe not completely agreed upon in the literature, but like that's just kind of what I've noticed. We start to see this real adaptation. That the good news is, if it's not genetically driven, it can be reversed to a certain extent to where you can get back to more of your femininity. But like there's steps that have to be taken to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk a little bit about your faith and how it has contributed to the doctor that you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's contributed. I mean, everything. Like it's like I think the health stuff is great. Like I want people to be healthy and energetic and not dependent on any government or anything like that. Like that's obviously a huge goal. But what I really want is I want people to live intentionally and understand like where their temple came from. Like who created it. What are they doing with every time they do something or not? Like, how is it honoring this temple that God has given to them? And, it's not that we want to become obsessive with our health and make it an idol. Like, I don't think that's right. I think it's also, we don't want to make it meaningless, that like it doesn't have any value. But there is this middle of the road approach to living healthily that I think is so important I want to remind people. But the whole point for me is that if you live your whole life focused only on your health and all these worldly things, like you, at the end of it all, it's not going to be a great life. And when you meet your maker, like that's between you and God and like how things are going to pan out for you. But it'd be terrible for somebody to forfeit their soul, over this goal of trying to live just a life all about themselves and their health. Like that's not the whole point. So I want people to realize that their faith is an integral part of their healing, and in my opinion, for their eternity. That's really what matters more than anything else.
I love that you said that. Were you raised in a religious home, or when did this become so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised by the grace of God. I was raised by Christian parents. Like they did their best to keep me on the straight and narrow and make sure that I was understanding the gospel and kind of what what they believed. And it wasn't until I probably was like 18, 19 in college that it became, I guess, like my own belief, my own faith. And it was honestly through all the schooling I was going through and just all the academic professors, like, and science courses I was taking, just saying like, yeah, like no creator and like the Big Bang and all these different things. And I'm just like how could you say that? And I read the book Case for Christ, which I'm not sure if anyone's read this book, but it's by Lee Strobel. He was actually just on like Tucker Carlson or some big podcast, I can't remember, but it's kind of an older book. And I read that book, and it was really compelling. And he's like this investigative journalist, and it was just investigating religion and all these different things. And he kind of landed on this whole idea that what the Bible says is true, and it was just revolutionary for him, and it was helpful for me, and so it became my own. But I think getting married and having kids, it's kind of just and having a business and having a social platform, it keeps kind of pointing back to me that I'm more concerned about what God thinks of me than what people think, and I want to kind of maintain that as long as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a beautiful way to go through life.
Yeah.
Right? Because God is ever present and ever knowing. And so if you're holding yourself accountable to God, that's a pretty good standard to live by.
Yeah. It's not an easy one to live by, but for sure. But that's why I think, we've been given grace to do it. And it's not by our own efforts necessarily. It's by our belief, for sure. Like, we got to have a faith that's strong, but even the faith of a mustard seed, I think is good enough for God. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I also think that God is ever forgiving. Right. And so I don't think God has any expectation that any of us are going to be perfect. I mean, that's what being a human is. Humans are imperfect.
Sure.
Adam and Eve didn't even get through 24 hours.
Is that how long it was? Was 24 hours?
It was less than 24 hours.
Wow. Yeah, that's not too good.
That they were in the garden before Eve ate the apple.
That's funny. Yeah.
So, so I don't think there's any expectation for that we're going to be perfect. And I also don't think that there's any expectation for us to be anything more than ourselves, in that so many people spend so much time comparing to others and meeting other people's standards. And that is not what we're here for.
Right.
We are all here for a unique purpose.
Yeah.
And no one is going to be a better version of me than me, because how could they be?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm not going to be a better version of someone else.
Right.
Try as I might, like, it's just not going to happen.
So true.
So I think there's something almost comforting when you realize and accept that your only responsibility in this world is to be the very best version of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Who God's called you to be. I think there's a, as the Bible says, there's a peace that surpasses understanding. Like when you have that. And I think that so many people don't have peace, in our world. Like, it's so chaos driven and, response driven, and it's just all reactionary. But like, for those who, for me, in my opinion, like, for me, it's like, for those who are in Christ, like, that's what allows me to have peace, like, it's because I'm not putting it just in myself. Like, I think that's a very comforting thing. But if I had to put it all in me and me having to do all this stuff all the time, like, and all the things I got on my plate, like, it would drive me insane. Like, I would go crazy. But I trust in my Maker, and I trust that He has a good plan for those who love Him. And I just lean into that, and it does help with health tremendously. Like, it is very beneficial, especially when you get back to this 90% of your diseases are being caused by stress. When I can minimize fear, which I think is really what drives most of this stress we're referring to, when I don't have to fear, when I fear not, when I see all these things and I read all these things, like, to me, I can remind myself what's true. I feel like my health greatly benefits from that. And I think we can all tap into that much, much more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, my best friend famously says to me, she's a Rebbitzin, the wife of a rabbi. And she just famously says to me, like, I don't have to worry about that because ultimately God is in charge of the world. Yes, we cannot be passive people on the journey, right? Like we have to be an active person in our journey.
Right.
But ultimately, I don't control what happens. God controls what happens. So all I need to do is my job and play my role. And I cannot be tied to the outcome because the outcome is not up to me.
Yeah. It's already been determined.
It's already been determined.
Battle's already been won.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love it. It's great.
Well, I loved having you here today. It was
so
just
fun.
so wonderful to spend time with you. And I love what you're doing. I think you have some programming coming up, some faith-based programming.
Yeah. So it's an online community. So we're going to do a virtual health summit in January. I have some awesome people lined up for that. And maybe you and I should talk about this too. Maybe we'll put you on this panel, but we could talk about that afterwards. But it's going to be a panel of some experts in different fields of health that we'll be doing all virtually. So you don't have to like fly to any different city or country to join. You can actually just join from your comfort of your living room. But it's going to be great. We're going to go over some awesome topics. And then we're also launching, in kind of accordance with that, is an online community. And so I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but the online community is going to be starting in December. And that community is going to be kind of like, again, we just want to connect real people to real people and help kind of walk them through, not like, a bunch of, we're not trying to become their primary care providers, but we just want to walk them through the basics of what it means to be a healthy human living in our modern culture and just like get away from, AI and all these things and like actually bring real people together and just like support them in a community. And so like, that's kind of the objective with it. And that should be starting in January or December. So we'll be looking for more information on that.
Wonderful. So how do people hear about this? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so if they just go to dr.austin.lake, that's my Instagram. They can also search my name. The community is going to be called the Kingdom Path to Wellness. And so you'll probably be able to search that. We're going to have a community built around that, but I'll be providing more links and stuff like that once it comes available.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your wisdom, for doing what you do.
Same to you.
You're really making a tremendous impact. And I mostly love the fact that you are a truth seeker and a truth teller. And that is something that we need now more than ever. And for the people who can bravely stand up and say, how we're doing it is wrong. And we need to give people the opportunity to be healthy because the system is very broken and oftentimes intentionally leading people astray. And so in as much as we can be trusted guides out there, and you and I both know we are called to do that.
Right.
So in as much as we can step into our truth and our calling and provide that very needed service. And it's not always an easy job to do. I'm sure that people say things about you just like they say things about me.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of an iron constitution.
Yeah, and again, I think it gets back to what we were saying before. Like, we have to remind ourselves of whose opinion that matters the most to us. And I think when you can do that in the moment, it helps to really just ride out that storm. But it is challenging at times. So I think, I'll be praying for you, and I know you're doing a lot of good work, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. And I appreciate somebody like yourself who has all the credentials, who is willing to risk it for the truth, and it helps my arguments. It helps others' arguments that maybe are not considered to be experts in particular fields when we go out and support what people like yourself is saying. Like, we all need to kind of support each other in this mission of just sharing truth. So I really do appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining us today. And if you like our mission and want to join our mission, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. And know that I will be back next week, same time, same place. It's Dr. Jenn. Bye for now.